Urania was born in a family of weavers. She lived along with her grandmother and her mother named Darlene. From childhood, her grandmother taught her how to weave, and at age 10, she was already weaving her own clothes. An independent girl and at the same time dreamy, Urania spent most of the night on the roof of her house, watching the stars and embroidering in the moonlight the things that came to her imagination. On her 14th birthday, she argued with her granny, who said that her embroidery was a worthless waste of time and line. Urania fled to a place near the river, where she always went when she wanted to be alone, and there she finished her white kitten embroidery until she fell asleep. She only woke up at night, and upon returning, she found the village during a monster attack, which ended with the fire of 5 p.m., where she lost her mom and her grandma. Urania fled into the forest, carrying the embroidery, the only memory she still had, when her legs would no longer carry her. Further, she dropped to her knees and looked up at the starry sky, begging for help. A shooting star cut through the sky and fell into the cornfields a few yards from where she stood. In the depth of the crater, she found a meteorite, which had a shimmering butterfly-shaped crystal. When she touched it, Urania received her butterfly emblems on her cheeks. On the same night, Urania faced the 3 monsters that surrounded her. She was saved by the grandmother baby, who came to life after one of Urania's spells bounced and struck at her embroidery. Urania fainted soon afterwards from shock and weariness when using magic for the first time in her life. I watched everything from a distance, and without interference, I needed to know how far Urania was able to get. We met each other the next morning when she woke up. I admit, it was nicer than I had hoped it would be. She did not freak out or had a denial attack. On the contrary, she was very understanding when I explained who I was and what I was doing. There, you asked for help and I came. I explained. You asked for help and I came, I said, pointing to the crystal, and my job is to help you reach your full potential. As discussed in the chapter about Mewnie Urania decided that she would protect her people when she returned to the village and found it decimated. For this, she needed to find ways to use the crystal without it cutting and burning her hands. Then, using materials she found in the debris of her house, she mounted the wand by attaching the crystal to the end of a knitting needle and tying it to the needle with a ribbon bow. Urania proved a dedicated student, practicing magic morning, noon, and night, stopping only to eat and sleep. Urania's spells were pretty basic, from bursts of energy to simple levitation spells, compared to what is done today. Her spells were not at all exceptional. You can still find some of her spells in the basic chapter of the Book of Spells. The Book of Spells was originally her grandmother's book, which was one of the few things to survive the fire. It became special when Urania went to write down the spells she learned using the magic fluid released by the crystal as ink. She defended the village relentlessly between the 5th and 2nd years BM. In 4 BM, a small group already helped her to defend the village. The Mewnies began to call her Queen Butterfly in the same year. This title came obviously due to her cheek marks, her wand, and her Mewberry wings. Between the years 4 and 3 BM, a rough wooden and earthen construction was erected on the slopes of the Great Mewnie Rock, which would later become known as Urania's Fort. The place would serve as headquarters during Mewniependence and later as a royal seat and home to the newly crowned monarch. One of her first acts as queen was to name 6 ministers to aid her region. These 6 were the generals of Urania during the independence, and from them the noble houses of Mewnie arose. In year 2 a.m., Urania married Falcon Redbird, whom she had relations since 5 p.m. Falcon was a red-headed, spontaneous boy who had eyes that were precious and alert as birds of prey, and could see enemies on the horizon. So he and his family renamed Redbird. The wedding marked the opening of the Queen's Tower, the first stone structure of the Butterfly Castle. Due to the fire of 5 MB, Urania developed a trauma up by fire. To keep the palace warm during the winters, the warm waters of a nearby thermal region were channeled through the walls and rooms. The fireplaces in the castle were built after the death of Urania. In the first 3 years of her region, Mewnie had grown remarkably fast around the Butterfly Castle. The village was now a town. Ships and galleys from neighboring kingdoms were already passing through waters and port. She also established that all of the castle's employees would be paid employees and made slavery and servitude a crime. The reason is a simple fact that her ancestors were servants who fled their masters. In 4 a.m., at age 23, Urania gave birth to her first child and heiress, Usagina Butterfly, and the first princess of Mewnie, a blonde girl with bunnies on her cheeks. And in 10 a.m. was born her second daughter, a girl with red hair and question marks on her cheeks, called Jokina Butterfly. Between the intervals of duties of queen, Urania found time to weave. She herself wove her royal dress and both of her daughter's clothes. Although now Mewnie has its own knights, Urania didn't stop defending her kingdom herself. When possible, monster attacks were really rare and not as threatening as they were years ago. In 16 a.m., Queen Urania ordered the construction of a special room. It should be large and, above all, comfortable. This room became known as the Mewnie Room, and exists to this day. Urania built it so that when the princesses reached that life stage, they would pass through it with tranquility and structure. The room was first used 2 years later. When Usagina turned 14, she would inherit the wand. Urania made the decision because it was on her 14th birthday she found the crystal. When the day finally arrived in 18 a.m., Urania applied an enchantment on the wand so that it changed its appearance according to the personality of its new owner. The tradition would begin there and forever would remain so. In 22 a.m., a tragedy began in her life. Jokina, then 12, died after falling from the tower of her room. Royal mourning this decreed for a week in Mewnie. In honor of her daughter, Urania ordered Jokina's statues, sculptures, and busts to be scattered throughout the castle, as well as the message she left every morning. Urania put an end to her reign in 25 a.m., aged 43. After Usagina's marriage to Roderick Flowers, although she was no longer the queen, Urania continued to have influence in court, helping her daughter from time to time. Urania would still live to see her granddaughter Estelaria inherit her wand in the year 42 a.m. On her deathbed, Urania performed her last royal act. She had named me Sir Glosric of Terms, honorary Knight of the Queen Butterfly of Mewnie. My thank you gift is for being with me for all these years, she told me. Urania died of natural causes in 44 a.m. She was 63 years old. Her body was buried in the crypts underneath the Butterfly Castle. Mewnie and its citizens wept over the death of Urania, their first queen, their first heroine.